Hey everybody, this is Trying to Live here with another video tutorial. A few of you guys saw before my Keosynchronous orbit or my Keostationary orbit, depending on how you want to call it. Basically, as the Earth or Kerbin, the planet Kerbin, spins beneath me, I keep up with it and stay over the same spot. This is my build and also a tutorial. So here you can see we're starting off with an advanced SAS and 3 RCS fuel tanks. We're going to put, looks like 16 total RCS units in 2 rings, trying to get them nice and even. And I always put 1 extra on there just to keep it balanced out. Or not, excuse me, not to keep it balanced out, but to so I can always see the top of it. It makes it a little unbalanced, but I always know which way is up, and it helps me out in orienting if I need to. I won't really need it in this case, but it helps out quite a bit. Moving up a little bit, our penultimate, meaning second to last stage, or penultimate stage, is a fairly good stack. We're going to set up tricouplers, and I think this one is going to be 4 tanks high. Anyways, this was one of the challenges that I wanted to try and do a tutorial on, just because a lot of people are working on moon or MUN type things, well, you already have a MUN tutorial. I'm working on a new one, but I wanted to kind of show you guys another cool thing you can do in the new experimental release. Here I'm just adding in a few boosters just to get me started, and that's about it for the rocket. Just going to add a couple struts just to make it a little more stable. The more struts you add, basically the more stable things are, and the more stable things are, the straighter they stay, and the straighter things stay, the more stable your rocket is. There you can see I added my 3 liquid booster rockets to the first stage so that all the rockets are going to fire at the same time, and then later on I'm going to drop off the liquid rockets. But we'll get this thing launched and we'll see what we get out of that. So we're going to launch it, and this rocket's very good. It's nice and stable. Here you have kind of the idea of what to build so that you can make your own. It's up to you. And you don't even need to actually use the RCS units at the top. It just makes it a little easier to do some of the fine tuning. They're a lot more subtle and a lot easier to use. Excuse me. So here we're just dropped off the solid boosters, and you can see we're slowing down, but it's not because the rocket's underpowered. It's actually because the power suddenly dropped, and the wind resistance basically lowers it down. Basically, the faster you go, the harder the wind pushes on you. So there's almost a max speed for the amount of thrust. And so it's not actually related to gravity. It's actually related to the drag of the air. And so even though the rocket slows down there for a second, it's actually not related to the rocket not being able to fight against gravity. It's that the wind resistance just slows it down to its max speed. But as the air gets thinner and as gravity gets less and less, it makes it easier for the rocket to push up, and also as it gets lighter. But mostly it's actually related to the air. The air actually slows it down considerably. If you ever drop out of orbit, you'll notice that your rocket, or excuse me, your capsule, it'll be streaking in at 1,000 meters per second, and it'll hit the lower atmosphere and slow down just to a few 100 meters per second, and that's just the wind drag. And so there's basically a max speed. It's not a big deal. We'll just power through it. You can see a lot of this rocket is just to get us, it takes more rocket to get a little ways than to go to extreme distances. But that's the point of this multi-stage rockets. You get rid of that extra weight. So we're kind of in the boring part. When I'm firing my rocket upward, I don't like to speed forward very much, just because I like to stay in good control. But normally when I'm firing rockets and I'm trying to make orbits, I'm always trying to kind of stay nice and low, so I'm not using a lot of fuel pointing straight up. In this case, I've got plenty of fuel. It's actually an overbuilt rocket. It's very effective, and so I'm just actually going to let this rocket burn out quite a bit of its fuel, just to get nice and high. And one of the reasons for that is we actually have to do quite a few orbits to get high enough, and just kind of basically we'll pass a lot of our orbit to try to do as many of our burns on the apoapsis and the paraapsis. And so what happens is you'll do a lot of revolutions and a lot of orbits, and as you do that, if you aren't above 150 kilometers, then you're limited to like 10x speed, something like that. It's a very low speed, a warp speed that you can't speed time ahead. And so if you add the extra time, or if you actually add the extra height, then you're allowed to warp faster, so that you can save yourself time. Even though the Kerbinauts, they actually in the game they actually spend more time. It saves you effort. And so here you can see I'm starting to go up high. My rocket, for whatever reason, actually leans the right way, ever so slightly. We actually are going to head, I guess it's toward the east, I don't really know, toward 90 degrees. I don't worry about north and east. We just want to head straight to 90 degrees. And if you look at the bottom there, that right below the nav ball, that HDG, there's a little number there. Now that you can see that line, it says 90 on it, so that is 90 degrees. But we want to make sure that heading number is at 90 degrees, as much as possible, or as close as possible to it. And that's just going to help us make sure that we keep a nice an orbit that matches the spin. If we get too far off for too long, then it'll still be a geosynchronous orbit, but not necessarily a geostationary orbit, and you have a little bit of wobble. So we want to keep it at 90 as often as possible. And sometimes you'll see me stop the burn if I'm too far off that 90 degrees, get it back, and then burn some more. But right now we're just making our orbit larger. We've gotten up, and we are way out there, and we're just in our penultimate stage. Just trying to get the rocket toward the right direction. You can see I'm kind of struggling to try to get it perfect as much as possible, and you can locking it in with that advanced SAS unit. The orbit's going out, and probably in a second, yeah, here I'm doing it. I'm slowing my burn because I'm not at the apogee anymore, and so I'm actually wasting extra fuel, and I'm not being as effective as I could be. If you noticed in my tutorial, you see I'm warping ahead here. If you noticed my tutorial before, one of the things that I told you was always do your burns at your apogee or your perigee. In this case, obviously, we don't have a perigee; it's still inside the planet. But doing your burn at the apogee can be very helpful. Now, you also have to watch out that sometimes if you try to do your burn at the apogee for your orbit, you'll actually run out of orbit. You'll actually start heading down toward the planet before you have enough speed to orbit. So you want to do it a little bit before your apogee when you're trying to get an orbit. But in this case, we're doing pretty good. We're at a good position, and we're just trying to burn this out. Now our goal is 2,800,000 and 870,000 meters, or let's see, it'd be 2,870 kilometers is where the Keosynchronous orbit is. So we're going to need to get out to that speed or that distance. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to basically keep stepping my orbit up slightly more and more and more and more until I get to that goal. And you can see here we're going at 1,000x, 100x. Sometimes I'll even miss it and just go around again. If we had put ourselves in a very low orbit, that would have been much harder to pull all that off, just because we'd be going at 2x or 5x or 10x instead of 100x or 1,000x. Here I'm getting close to the apogee, and so I'm just gonna start making my Hoffman transfer orbit, and basically what that is just an elliptical orbit that brings me higher, and then once I get higher, I do a second burn that expands the opposite side of it. And so I'm doing basically just expanding the other side back and forth until I get where I want. And so here I'm burning hard, and we're going to see that para-apsis come out, and then it's going to turn into an apoapsis as we get closer and closer to where we want to be. And you can see the two are switching places. And then when we get closer, I'm going to slow down the burn, and hopefully we won't go too far over. Sometimes you go over. It's amazing how fast the farther out your apoapsis is, the easier it is to overshoot. So you can see I overshot by it looks like 400 kilometers or 400 meters per second, or 400 kilometers. I think it's 400 kilometers. There we go. I'm not used to kilometers and meters and things like that. I'm such an American. Anyways, so I overshot by about 400 kilometers per second. Not a big deal. I'm just going to turn around and slow down by that much. I just need to bring that apogee or apoapsis back in. Locking in, making sure that I'm sort of pointing the right direction. I think I'm 1 degree off there. Not a big deal. You notice I didn't full blast at that time. I'm just going to be a lot more patient. Easy does it. You don't have to speed into this. You can see I'm flying down to that number right now. Turn it all the way off. Getting closer. Give it a little boost. Turn it off. Try it. Test again. And so I'm going back and forth. Testing. Enough. Not enough. Keep going. 82. So we're closer. Just a little too much right there. Not a big deal. I might spin it around. I might not. Here we go. This is actually a game that I played ahead of time. I just want to make sure I had a good video for you guys, and then now I'm doing commentary on it. Sometimes I do these things live. Sometimes I edit really cool things. And sometimes I do things like this where I've already played the game, and I just want to show you a good run that I did so that you can learn from something good, and so that I'm not explaining the game to you while I'm trying to do something right. And so now you can see that I'm boosting forward, and I'm going to expand that other side. I just ran out of fuel. And so now I'm actually going to use my RCS units to finish this off. It takes a lot of effort with the RCS units just because they are so weakly powered. But they don't suck fuel up. They sip fuel. They're pretty useful. And the biggest usefulness of them right now in this game is that they are they're very minute. You can actually run small amounts of burst, and so you can very finely tune your orbit, almost to an extreme amount, and you'll see that later in this game. Is you'll I don't know. I hope you're amazed. I think you'll be amazed at how round it ends up. The orbit ends up being, and so we're just spinning it out, and you see it's pretty round now, but it's a little off. There's about 2 kilometers off there, and then I think 3 kilometers off the other side. So there's about 3 or so, or 5 or so kilometers difference, and I just want to fix that a little bit. And so I'm going to go back over to the apogees, over to the perigee, and fix those up. And remember, we're always fixing the opposite side of our orbit. See, I missed my apoapsis, and so I'm going to go again down to the paraapsis or whatever. There we go. Anyways, so one of the things that I want to point out is whenever I'm doing these bursts, I'm always turning my RCS units off. I still have my SAS unit on, but I turn my RCS unit off because I don't want the rocket to use up RCS fuel in the process. So I'm aligning it right here. The cool thing with the RCS units is I don't have to turn the rocket around every time. I can just go forward and back, speed up, slow down. And so my paraapsis is a little short, so I'm going to bring it up, and I'm just going to give it a few bursts. So I give it a nice burst there, and I've gone way over. So I'm just going to do a reverse burst. Get a little burst, no big deal. Now I'm way under. All right, try again. Burst forward. Now here I've actually pressed the caps lock, and so my bursts are actually much more minute. I basically just tap the button, and you can barely even see the flames coming out, the energy coming out, just because it's producing so little. And yeah, I'm almost there, getting closer. So basically, right there, what I just did is I literally just touched the button, and it was so little, but it was enough to make almost a whole kilometer's difference of the para-apsis. And so just making sure, trying to get it nice and good in there. And looks good for me, and so I'm going to spin around to the other side, and we're gonna fix that apoapsis and try to get things looking good. You can see already that we're pretty much following the planet. This is all just kind of a little bit of housekeeping. The planet and we are keeping together, getting up to the para-apsis, and we're just going to do a little cleaning. So we're gonna spin it around, and as we get up to our location, I think I passed it, so I'm going to do it again. There we go. See, if one of the cool things about that time warp is that we just make a mistake, not a big deal. For the Kerbals in the rocket ship, it's to them it's 4, 5, 6 hours just waiting. For us, it's like, hey, whoop, a few seconds, no big deal. So we're gonna spin it around, lock it into place, and then fix that other side there. So we need to change it by just about almost 3 kilometers per second. So we'll give it a little burst here, and you can't even see when I'm doing my burst. There was actually a little burst there. Or maybe it wasn't a burst. Maybe I'm just waiting to get to the para-apsis. There we go. Now we're at the para-apsis. You can see that the orbits, the para-apsis and the apoapsis are so close that it's starting to spaz out a little bit. You can see a little bit of burst coming out. What do we got there? Not yet. All right. There we go. And you can't even really see it just because it's so little, the amount of work that's coming out. And you can see it's kind of seizing a little bit just because it's how close it is to each of them together. And you'll see that the altitude meter doesn't move, and so that was pretty good. And you can see the planet literally does not move. The planet's moving. We're just keeping up with it. Anyways, so one of the things that you may have noticed in my video is that I actually was hovering right over top of a specific location. And there's a pretty easy way to do that. I'm not actually going to tell you. I'm going to leave that as sort of a exercise to you. There's actually a pretty simple way to hover over a specific spot as long as it's on the equator. And so, for example, the space station, or the space center, I should say, the space center is on the equator, and so it makes things a lot easier. Here I'm actually just spinning through some camera modes. Some of them aren't very good for this kind of a thing, but and so basically one of the things that you can do is you actually pick your spot, which makes things look really cool. We can post a video on YouTube and share it on Reddit and be like, hey, check it out, I'm hovering right over this, and it's pretty fantastic. And it's not really that hard to do, but I'm not gonna tell you the secret just because I'm gonna leave it up to you. And it's not actually that hard. And if you figure it out, then pat yourself on the head, on the back, not on the head. You pat yourself on the head and rub your tummy. Whatever. Anyways, so here I'm just kind of spinning around. One of the things I just want to make sure is that it's actually a really good, geosynchronous orbit. That this is actually the altitude I want to be at. Just because I want to be able to, say actually the planet's not moving. And it looks like after several days of this, it's not moving. And one of the cool things you might notice is that we're only about 13 days into the mission, and I've seen way more than 13 sunrises and sunsets. And apparently sunrise and sunset on the planet is less than an hour. But anyways, I'm actually getting ready right now to deorbit. And if you noticed, I used 1/2 of one of my 3 tanks. I brought 3 tanks for my RCS thrusters, and I've only used 1/2 of a tank to do all this. And the reason why I have more fuel, brought so much extra fuel, is actually twofold. One is the extra fuel actually makes the ship heavier, and a heavier ship is harder to push forward, which means I can more accurately adjust the amount of the distance opposite when I'm doing my adjustments of the orbit. That heavier weight slows me down, so I can I'm not likely to overshoot my target. And the other reason why is it's our ticket home. Because what good is it for flying around at the exact same spot if you can't make your way home? And so I'm just doing basically a retro burn. No big deal, just the same way you deorbit every time. You just burn opposite the direction. And a Keosynchronous or a Keostationary orbit works exactly the same. You just deorbit. You can see here we've only dropped about 1 kilometer. And we still seem like we're in the exact same spot, but we're traveling so much slower now that we'll actually almost fall straight down. We'll still, orbit a bit, but we'll almost seem like we're falling straight down. And we actually don't even use all the RCS fuel. You can see here that we're basically almost at a standstill, and that's more than enough to get us back. And I think I start speeding up and going home in a second here. I actually contemplated. I'm kind of goofing off also. I contemplated actually slowing myself to 0 and just letting gravity take me straight down. But I decided not to because it would take a little bit longer. So I just warped home. And if you pay really close attention, you can actually see the space junk that I just left behind there actually fly past me. I think I saw it, but maybe you'll see it. I think I was going very fast. Oh, there it goes. There it was. It just barely missed me. So that was kind of a close call. Anyways, so there you go. Keosynchronous orbit. Not actually that hard. You have to be able to do a good orbit. You have to be able to do a good Hoffman transfer where you can pick your orbit. You have to have the ability to fine tune things because at the distance, even though you're a long way out there and it seems like a huge distance, a little bit makes a big difference in whether the Earth is is passing you or not. Kerbal Planet, whatever. Anyways, go out there, make some cool videos. Go lay stationary over the space station, and you know what? Whatever you do, make sure you have fun.